Abraham Lincoln. On February 12, 1809, a great man was born right here in Kentucky in a log cabin. This man is known as Abraham Lincoln, our 16th President of the United States. Abraham was born in Hardin County, Kentucky to Thomas Lincoln and Nancy Hanks. His mother, Nancy, died when he was 9 years old, but he bonded with his stepmother, Sarah. She encouraged his education and his love to read and argue. As a child, Abraham Lincoln did hard work on the farm and some chores, but he always made time to read. He was known for walking miles to borrow a book. When Abraham was in his early 20s, he moved to Illinois to start a different life. What was our 16th president known for?
When he moved to Illinois, Lincoln continued to study and became a lawyer, then a politician. He ran for the position of senator, but then lost to Stephen Douglas in 1858. Then, in 1860, he ran against Douglas again and won the presidency. Lincoln built up the Republican Party into a strong, organized group. However, the Republicans of 1860 had today's Democratic views. He was against slavery, but when he was elected, the South was worried about his policies and seceded from the Union. They considered themselves not a part of the Union. So Lincoln had to lead the country through the bloodiest war they had ever seen. In his famous Gettysburg Address, when he was dedicating the cemetery for people who had died there, he spoke about how that we were highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain. This nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Lincoln, in 1863, issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed all slaves in the South. He wanted to peacefully resolve the problems between the North and the South, and was always campaigning for the South to return to the Union. Eventually, the South did return to the Union, and for the first time in a while, everything was at peace.
Abraham Lincoln was our tallest president. At 6'4", he would stand out even today, and he certainly towered over the men and women of his era. The top hat he habitually wore in public made him taller still. You couldn't miss him in a crowd. The 16th president wore the top hat in war and peace, on the stump and in Washington, on occasions formal and informal, and he even wore it the night he was assassinated.
Nowadays, we have trouble envisioning Lincoln without his top hat, but how he began wearing it remains unclear. Early in his political career, Lincoln probably chose the hat as a gimmick. In those days, he was rarely seen without his stovepipe, the traditional 7 or 8-inch high hat that gentlemen had been wearing since early in the century. True, Lincoln's version was often battered a bit, as if hard-worn, an affectation perhaps intended to suit his frontier image.
Abe was known for carrying letters inside of his famous hat, and by the time of his presidency, this habit of using it as a briefcase was well known. As a lawyer in Illinois, Lincoln was a frightfully messy person. Papers, briefs, letters, and notes scattered to the four corners of his office. The top hat didn't entirely solve his chaotic problem, but it did at least allow him to separate important documents from the untidy whirlwind of papers on his office desk.
President Lincoln would continue his habit and tradition even after becoming the president, and this speaks to his unassuming personality, but also to his powerful purpose. After all, he was the president, delivering important messages and ideas from that tall black hat.
In August of 1864, Lincoln was on horseback on his way to the Soldiers' Home about 3 miles northeast of the White House, where he had use of a stone cottage in the summer months. A would-be assassin fired from the road, shooting the stovepipe off of Lincoln's head. Soldiers who found it said that there was a bullet hole through the crown. This incident gave rise to the popular notion that the hat saved Lincoln's life.
On the night Lincoln died, he dressed for the theater in a silk top hat, to which he had added a black silk mourning band in memory of his son Willie. When Lincoln was shot, the hat was on the floor beside his chair.
Now that we've learned about Abraham Lincoln and his hat, we can make one of our own.